when you get out, almost like coming up from very deep under the water, you know, you have to kind of readjust to a new environment, being free. I mean, I could go on and on about how difficult it is coming out of prison. Coming out of prison is another whole thing. It's like, while you're locked up, you keep thinking to yourself, if I could just get out, I could do this and that and this and all these other things, but then you get out and you find out it's not that easy. There's a lot of things working against you. You got to pay bills, you got to pay rent, you got to have a job, you got to do all these other things that when you're in prison you don't have to worry about any of that stuff. You just have to worry about, you know, not getting killed by some guy who's like a lunatic or getting caught up in some kind of a riot in the prison. The problems that I had with readjusting to the free world were different. People were rude. You know, there wasn't the kind of respect and care that people took in prison. I mean, when you're in a maximum security prison, people don't fuck with you for too little, you know, because you can get killed if you step on somebody's toe or you cut in line, stuff like that. You know, so it was a whole different, you're out here in the world and people are rude and people are harsh. And I found myself getting depressed at times because what it is that when you have all the stress and pressure of being in prison and that's removed, instead you're elated for a while, but then you start to crash and you start to think, this isn't what it's cracked up to be. Freedom is not as cool as I thought. It's not as great. It's just, you know, it's not what you'd hoped for in many ways. People would come to me too, you know. I can remember guys coming to me and offering me large amounts of money just to turn them on to people that I knew. Whenever you get in a really hard financial situation, it's like, I could easily, you know, just do a couple of deals and get out of this thing. But then, you know, I start thinking about, you get busted again, you're looking at mandatory life without parole, and there's no two ways about it. You're going to go away forever. So it wasn't worth it to me. Plus, I was over it at that point. You know, I didn't really want to go back into that life. I ended up going to work for a lawyer here in Manhattan, a guy named Ivan Fisher, writing briefs for him and doing a lot of legal work for him. Mind you, I had a lot of problems with that too because I was on what they call special parole. And they were watching me very closely. Couldn't leave the 5 boroughs without permission. They made my life really miserable for a long time until I got off the parole. I had written this novel while I was locked up, Smack Goddess, which came out in 1990. Came out right after I got out, within months of my release. So when I came out, I had a writing career that was already beginning to revive itself. So my journalism career was starting to take off too. I started a magazine called Prison Life Magazine, and as a result of having the magazine, we made a deal to do 4 documentaries, Prison Life and HBO present. We did Prisoners of the War on Drugs. We did another one called Execution Machine, Texas Death Row. Did another one called Thug Life in DC that won an Emmy in 1998. And then we did that one over there, Gladiator Days, which was the last one, Anatomy of a Prison Murder. So we did these 4 documentaries for HBO. And in the meantime, we made a feature film called Slam. While we were shooting the documentary in DC, in the DC City Jail, we convinced them to let us shoot this feature film in there. And I wrote the script, Mark directed it, and I produced it. We had this kind of spoken word thing that was going on there. And
lessons more ancient than Greece. Apollo never my creed, my creed. Oh, battler, we'll battle ya, so bring the troops if you wanna. Satellites in the sky, some selling clouds in the corner. But we living for the land, from the soul to the sand. And the water in the sea be the essence of me. If you ain't ready for the truth, then put it back on the tree. Give me the strength to bend.
And the movie was a huge success. It was unbelievable. We won Sundance. We won the Grand Jury Prize at Sundance, and we won the Camera d'Or at Cannes. So the movie had a tremendous impact. As a result of all that, HBO hired me to be a consultant on this series, Oz, and I worked on that prison series, Oz, which I didn't really like. I felt the guy didn't really understand what prison life was all about, and I kept arguing with him about that. So after the first year of that, I quit that, and I pitched another idea for a series about people who were on parole coming out of prison, to take that material that I had just lived through and turn it into a series. I pitched that to Showtime, and they ended up going for it. I wrote the pilot and was the executive producer and showrunner and creator of the show. Did 33 hours of that, lasted for 3 years. It was a great experience. And then when that ended, went back to work at High Times magazine, which I'd been involved in way back in the 70s, doing a lot of journalism and writing screenplays, producing movies, doing documentaries. I just produced a documentary called Crude that we shot in Ecuador, won a lot of awards all around the world. I love doing documentaries. That's probably the thing that I like to do most. I'm just beginning a documentary now about John Gotti Jr. and Sr. and their whole relationship. You guys saw that meeting that we had earlier today. So that's the kind of thing that I'm doing now. I've known Stone I did an interview with him for Prison Life magazine because he'd been locked up. So he and I became very good friends. He ended up hiring me to play a small role in Wall Street too, which was fun.
And one mobile phone.
Well, one of the things that I've always felt fortunate about was that I didn't have children when I went to prison, because I used to see these guys in the prison visiting room with their kids, and it was agonizing, you know, to see them being pulled away from their kids and they go, "Daddy, when are you coming home?" And, you know, it was just, so I was grateful that I had never had kids before I got locked up. And of course, you know, when I was away and didn't know when I was going to get out, I always wondered, well, will I ever be able to have a family? So when I finally met Kim and got married and started to have kids, I felt great about it. My oldest son, Max, great kid, just graduating from high school. My middle son, Dashel, is a great kid too, really good student, big, tall, great kid. And then we have a daughter, Sasha, who's 10 years old now. A very sweet girl too. Kim and I divorced a few years back, and I'm now remarried and have a 3-year-old son and a 19-year-old stepdaughter. So altogether I have 5 kids. I mean, at this point in my life, I don't hide my past from anybody. It's so out there in many ways that even if I did, people would find out about it ultimately. You know, the regrets are interesting. I've been thinking about this a lot. I don't regret any of what I did as far as, you know, the smuggling and the breaking the law, but there's a lot of sort of things that happen to people around you, like the human tragedies of the business that's associated with that life. When I look back on it now, so many of the people that I know, that I lived with and was involved with in those days, are either dead or in prison. Most of them, you know. Very few people survive that life. And I think people know that when they go, a lot of them get strung out on drugs, a lot of them go to prison and don't make it out, or they die in some kind of a smuggling accident. I mean, there's so many of them, of my close friends, who've died as a result of being involved in that kind of activity. You know, the fallout is what you regret. Not the thing itself, but the repercussions of it. Because of its illegality, largely because of the fact that it's illegal. Let's put it this way, I'm not ashamed of it. Some of the stuff that I did and some of the things that happened, I'm not particularly proud of. The interesting thing about it is in many ways it has worked to my advantage. This recent interview that I just did with John Gotti, this story that I wrote about him, John Gotti Jr. wouldn't talk to anybody in the media, but he would talk to me. The reason he would talk to me was because of who I was and where I'd been. When I first met him, he said, "Your reputation precedes you." So what happened to me, and the fact that I stood up and did not become a stool pigeon or a rat, that has worked tremendously to my advantage. I have credibility in areas of the society that most people don't, you know, and I've used that. I used that for my material, for my writing, for, you know, the films that we've made. Now, when it comes to like parents of people that are involved, it takes a while, and I don't immediately blurt that out, you know, but I'm not ashamed of it, and I don't try to hide it. I think that's a mistake, and I wouldn't do that. You know, I mean, it happened, and most of the people that I know don't look down on me as a result of it. They think, you know, most of the people that I know feel like marijuana should be legalized, and they really don't look at me as being a bad person. You know, for smuggling pot, you're almost seen as a cultural hero, you know.